The warship Endless Dawn drifted through space like a metal whale swimming through an ocean of stars. Inside its gray walls, thousands of soldiers from different worlds prepared for the battle that would come in less than 12 hours. Some prayed to their gods. Some sharpened their weapons. Some simply sat in silence, thinking about the homes they might never see again. Commander Zixtalan walked through the narrow corridors with heavy steps. His blue crystalline scales caught the dim lights of the ship, making him look like a walking gemstone. He had 4 eyes, 2 large ones in front and 2 smaller ones on the sides of his head. His mouth was surrounded by 4 sharp mandibles that clicked together when he was nervous or deep in thought. He was a Valoran, one of the oldest warrior races in the galaxy. His people had been fighting wars among the stars when most other species were still learning to make fire. Zixtalan himself had led armies across 17 different campaigns. He had burned enemy fleets, conquered hostile worlds, and watched friends die in his arms. The scars on his body told the story of a life spent in battle. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, he would fight alongside humans for the first time. Zixtalan found the recreation bay at the end of the corridor. It was a large room with metal tables and chairs bolted to the floor. A few soldiers sat in small groups, talking quietly or playing games in their home worlds. The air smelled like a mixture of different foods and drinks, each one designed for the biology of a different species. He saw her sitting alone at a corner table. She was small compared to him, barely reaching his chest if she stood up. Her skin was light brown, and her dark hair was tied back in a simple knot. She wore the gray uniform of the Human Coalition Forces with a small flag patch on her shoulder. Her name was Katie Morgan, and she was a lieutenant in the human military. According to the mission briefing, she would be his partner for the assault on the Crest Dominion's forward base. Zixtalan had requested a Valoran partner, or at least someone from one of the established warrior races. Command denied his request. He walked over to her table and stood there, waiting for her to notice him. She looked up from her drink and smiled. It was a strange expression, one that showed her teeth. Among Valorans, showing teeth was a sign of aggression. But Zixtalan had learned that humans use it to show friendliness. It was very confusing. "Commander Zixtalan," she said, pronouncing his name slowly and carefully. "Please sit down. I was hoping we could talk before the mission." He lowered himself into the chair across from her. It was too small for his body, designed for species with different shapes. His tail hung over the edge awkwardly. "I have read your service record," Zixtalan said. His voice was deep and rough, filtered through his translator device. "You have only been in active service for 4 years. You have participated in 6 combat operations. By Valoran standards, you are barely more than a trainee." Katie nodded slowly, not seeming offended by his words. "That's fair. By human standards, I'm actually pretty experienced. Our species has only been traveling between stars for about 30 years. We're still learning." Zixtalan's mandibles clicked in what his species used for a laugh. 30 years. My grandfather was already a war commander 30 years ago. His grandfather before him as well. The Valoran Empire has existed for thousands of cycles. "Impressive," Katie said. She took a sip of her drink, some kind of brown liquid that smelled bitter. "But you know what they say about young species. We're hungry. We have something to prove." The Valoran studied her carefully. She was so small, so fragile-looking. Her bones were probably hollow, compared to his. One good strike from his claws could tear her in half. And yet, there was something in her eyes that made him uncomfortable, a kind of hardness that did not match her soft appearance. "I have heard stories about humans," Zixtalan admitted. "Rumors mostly. The other races talk about you in strange ways. They say you are dangerous, but not in the way the Greek berserkers are dangerous. They say there is something wrong with your species, something broken inside you." Katie laughed at this. It was a short, sharp sound. "Something broken. I like that. Maybe they're right. What does that mean?" She leaned back in her chair and looked at him with those strange flat eyes. Humans only had 2 of them, both facing forward like predators. It was unsettling. "Tell me, Commander, what do you know about Earth? About our home world?" Zixtalan searched his memory. "It is a small planet in a minor star system. Class M atmosphere, mostly water coverage. Your species evolved there approximately 200,000 years ago, reached industrial development about 300 years ago, and achieved faster than light travel 32 years ago. You joined the Galactic Coalition as a junior member species 26 years ago. Those are facts, Katie said, but they don't tell you anything real about us. They don't explain why the other races are scared of humans. I am not scared of humans, Zixtalin said quickly. Perhaps too quickly. Katie smiled again, and this time it did look a little bit like aggression. Of course not. You're a legendary Valoran commander. You've conquered worlds. What could a species of soft, squishy primates possibly do to frighten someone like you? She leaned forward across the table. Would you like to find out? I have some time before the mission. I could tell you some stories about my people, about our history, about what we've done to each other and to ourselves over thousands of years before we ever looked up at the stars. Zixtalin felt a strange sensation in his chest. It was similar to what he felt before a battle, when danger was close but not yet visible. His instincts were telling him to be careful, but his curiosity was stronger than his caution. Yes, he said, tell me your stories, human. Help me understand what makes your people so special that the Coalition chose you for this mission despite your lack of experience. Katie Morgan finished her drink and set the glass down on the table with a soft click. She looked at the Valoran commander with an expression he could not read. Get comfortable, she said. This might take a while. And, Commander, try not to have nightmares afterward. Zixtalin did not understand why she would say such a thing. He had seen horrors that would break the minds of lesser beings. He had walked through the aftermath of planetary bombardments, stepped over the bodies of the fallen, breathed in the smoke of burning cities. What could a young species from a small planet possibly tell him that would disturb his sleep? He was about to find out. Katie Morgan was quiet for a long moment before she began speaking. Her eyes looked past Zixtalin, past the metal walls of the ship, past everything. She seemed to be looking at something very far away, something only she could see. Before I tell you about human wars, she said softly, I need you to understand something. We are not a unified species. We never have been. From the very beginning of our history, humans have been divided. Different tribes, different nations, different beliefs. We have always found reasons to fight each other. Zixtalin tilted his head in confusion. All species have internal conflicts in their early development. This is normal. But eventually civilizations mature. They unify. They put aside their differences and work together for the common good. That's the thing, Katie said. We never did. Not completely. Even now, 30 years after we started traveling between stars, humanity is still divided into hundreds of different nations. We have a coalition government for dealing with other species. But back on Earth, we still argue about borders and resources and old wounds that never healed. The Valoran commander processed this information slowly. His people had unified over 10,000 years ago when the first Valoran emperor had brought all the scattered tribes together under one rule. He had assumed all advanced species followed a similar path. This seems inefficient, he said. Katie laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, it is. It's incredibly inefficient. It's also what made us strong, because we've been practicing war against each other for a very, very long time. She folded her hands on the table and took a deep breath. Let me tell you about a city called Stalingrad. Zixtalin listened as she spoke. The translator in his ear converted her words into concepts he could understand, but some things did not translate well. He had to ask her to explain several times. Stalingrad, she told him, was a human city on a continent called Europe, about 80 years before humans reached the stars. Two powerful nations went to war with each other. One nation invaded the other, and the fighting eventually reached this city. The battle lasted for more than 5 months, Katie said. Both sides threw everything they had into the fight. The city was destroyed block by block, building by building. Sometimes soldiers from both sides were fighting on different floors of the same building, separated by nothing but a thin ceiling. Zixtalin tried to imagine this. Valoran warfare was conducted at long range whenever possible, using superior technology to destroy enemies before they could get close. The idea of fighting room to room, face to face, for months on end, was difficult to comprehend. How many casualties? He asked. Katie met his eyes. Almost 2 million. The number hit Zixtalan like a physical blow. His mandibles stopped clicking. His 4 eyes blinked out of sequence, a sign of extreme shock among his people. 2 million soldiers died in one battle? Not just soldiers, Katie said. That number includes civilians, too. Regular people who were trapped in the city and could not escape. Men, women, children. They starved to death. They froze to death in the winter. They were killed by bombs and bullets and fire. 2 million lives gone in 5 months. Over a single city. The Valoran commander was silent for a long time. The greatest battle in Valoran history, the Siege of Calaprime, had resulted in approximately 300,000 deaths over the course of 2 years. And that was considered a tragedy that still haunted his people's memory. This is madness, he finally said. Yes, Katie agreed. It was madness. And here's the truly terrifying part, Commander. Both sides knew it was madness. The generals, the soldiers, everyone knew that the cost was too high. And they kept fighting anyway. They kept sending more troops, more supplies, more weapons. Neither side would give up. Neither side would retreat. She leaned forward, her voice dropping lower. Do you want to know why? Because retreat was unacceptable. Because giving up meant admitting defeat. Because humans would rather die than surrender. Not all humans, not all the time, but enough of us, often enough, that it shapes who we are as a species. Zixtalan felt something cold settling in his stomach. He had fought many enemies in his long career. Some were stronger than Valorans. Some were smarter. Some had better technology. But all of them, every single one, would retreat when the battle turned against them. It was logical. It was rational. It was how wars were fought. What Katie was describing was something else entirely. Tell me more, he said, though part of him wanted to stop listening. Katie nodded slowly. Stalingrad was just one battle in one war. We call it World War II because it was the second time that almost every human nation fought each other at the same time. The first one was called World War I. It happened about 20 years before the second one. You had 2 planetary conflicts within 20 years. We had dozens of wars in between them, too, Katie said. Smaller ones, regional ones. We never really stopped fighting. We just changed who we were fighting against. She told him about the trenches. Long ditches dug into the ground where soldiers lived for months at a time. She told him about the mud, the disease, the rats that fed on the bodies of the dead. She told him about the chemical weapons, gases that burned the lungs and blinded the eyes. She told him about the charges across open ground, thousands of men running into walls of machine gun fire, dying by the hundreds for a few meters of muddy earth. One battle, called the Battle of the Somme, lasted for more than 4 months, Katie said. On the first day alone, there were over 50,000 British casualties. 50,000 men killed or wounded before the sun went down. And the next day, they sent more men over the top. And the day after that, and the day after that, Zixtalan's claws had unconsciously dug grooves into the metal table. He had not noticed he was doing it. Why? He asked. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Why would they keep fighting? Why not negotiate? Why not find another way? Katie looked at him with those 2 forward-facing predator eyes. Because we're human, Commander. Because giving up is not in our nature. Because we would rather die fighting than live knowing we surrendered. She paused, letting her words sink in. The humans who survived those wars. They went home and had children. And they raised those children with stories about courage and sacrifice and never giving up. And those children grew up and fought their own wars. And their children after them. Generation after generation. We've been teaching ourselves that the worst thing you can do is quit. Zixtalan understood now why the other races whispered about humans in fearful tones. It was not because humans were strong or fast or technologically advanced. It was because they were willing to endure things that other species would never accept. The cold feeling in his stomach had spread throughout his entire body. He was beginning to understand what Katie meant when she said something was broken inside humanity. And he was beginning to wonder if that broken thing was actually their greatest strength. There is a concept in Valoran philosophy, Zixtalan said slowly, We call it the breaking point. It is a moment when a warrior recognizes that victory is impossible and chooses to preserve his life for future battles. Every Valoran soldier is trained to recognize this moment. It is considered wise, not cowardly, to retreat when the breaking point is reached. Katie listened with interest. That makes sense. It's logical. Yes, it is logical. Zixtalan paused. Do humans have a similar concept? Katie thought about this for a moment. Then she shook her head. Not really. We have a saying instead. Katie continued. It goes like this. The only easy day was yesterday. I do not understand. It comes from our Special Operations Forces. Katie explained. The elite soldiers, the ones who do the most dangerous missions. They believe that every day should be harder than the one before. They train themselves to push past what they think their limits are. They learn to ignore pain, exhaustion, fear. They teach themselves that giving up is not an option. Zixtalan's translator struggled with some of these concepts. Pain was something to be avoided. Exhaustion was a signal that the body needed rest. Fear was a warning system designed to keep creatures alive. The idea of deliberately ignoring these things seemed like a kind of madness. Your elite soldiers train themselves to override their survival instincts, he asked. Yes, and it's not just the elite soldiers. Regular humans do it too, in their own ways. We have competitions where people run for hundreds of kilometers without stopping. We climb mountains where the air is too thin to breathe. We dive to depths where the pressure would crush most creatures. We do these things for fun. Katie smiled, but it was a strange, sad smile. Humans are very good at suffering. Commander, we've had a lot of practice. She told him about human endurance sports, about people who ran across deserts in the hottest temperatures, about people who swam across frozen seas, about people who lifted weights until their muscles tore, healed, and grew back stronger. There's a race on Earth called the Badwater Ultramarathon, Katie said. Runners go through a place called Death Valley in the middle of summer. The temperature can reach 50 degrees Celsius. The pavement gets so hot it can melt shoes. People run over 200 kilometers in these conditions, not because they have to, because they want to prove they can. Zixtalan tried to imagine a Valoran attempting such a thing. His people were hardy, but they were also rational. No Valoran would voluntarily subject themselves to such punishment without a practical reason. Why? He asked. It was becoming his most frequent question. Because we need to know our limits, Katie said, and then we need to push past them. It's like an addiction. Once you've proven you can do something impossible, you need to find something even more impossible to try next. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. There's a theory about why humans are like this. Our scientists think it might be connected to how we evolved. Our ancestors were not the strongest animals on Earth. They were not the fastest. They did not have sharp claws or thick skin or powerful jaws. What they had was endurance. Endurance. Early humans hunted by running, not by chasing prey and catching it quickly like other predators. They would follow an animal for hours, sometimes days, never letting it rest. Most animals can run faster than humans, but they can only run for short periods. Humans can run forever, or at least, it seems that way to other creatures. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion, and the humans would walk up to it and kill it. Zixtalan had never heard of hunting like this. It seemed inefficient, brutal, and terrifying. We call it persistence hunting, Katie continued, and we think it shaped who we became as a species. We learned that if we just kept going, kept pushing, kept refusing to stop, eventually we would win. It didn't matter if we were slower or weaker. All that mattered was that we never gave up. The Valoran commander sat in silence, processing everything he had learned. He thought about the crest of Minion base they would attack in a few hours. He thought about the 7 coalition assaults that had already failed. He thought about the enemy's superior defensive positions and the high probability of heavy casualties. And for the first time, he began to understand why human command was confident this mission would succeed. It was not because humans had better weapons or superior tactics. It was because humans would not stop. They would keep coming, wave after wave, soldier after soldier, until either the enemy broke or every last human was dead. And based on everything Katie had told him, Zixtalan suspected the humans would still be fighting long after any other species would have retreated. "I think I understand now," he said quietly, "why the Coalition chose humans for this mission, why the other races fear you. It is not your strength. It is your refusal to accept weakness." Katie nodded slowly. "We're not the biggest or the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but we might be the most stubborn, and sometimes that's enough." A soft alarm sounded through the ship, a gentle reminder that they were now 6 hours away from the mission. Zixtalan glanced at the clock display on the wall. He had been talking with Katie for nearly 5 hours. It felt like minutes. "We should rest," he said, though he made no move to stand up. Katie shook her head. "I'm too awake now. My mind is racing. It always gets like this before a fight." Zixtalan understood this feeling. Despite his exhaustion, his body was beginning to prepare for combat. His hearts were beating a little faster. His senses were becoming sharper. Ancient instincts were waking up inside him, getting ready for what was to come. "May I ask you a question?" he said. "Of course." The Crest Dominion has held their forward base for 3 cycles. 7 Coalition assaults have failed to break through their defenses. Each attempt has resulted in significant casualties. Many military analysts believe the base is essentially unconquerable without orbital bombardment, which would destroy the intelligence we need to capture. Katie nodded. She already knew all of this. It had been in the mission briefing. What makes Human Command believe this mission will succeed where all the others have failed? Katie was quiet for a moment. She seemed to be thinking about how to answer. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal object. It was a coin of some kind, worn smooth by years of handling. She placed it on the table between them. "This belonged to my great-grandfather," she said. "He fought in one of our old wars, a conflict we call World War II. During that war, there was a battle in a place called Bastogne." She began to tell the story. Zixtalan listened carefully, his translator working to convert her words into concepts he could understand. Bastogne was a town in a region called the Ardennes. During the war, enemy forces launched a surprise attack and surrounded the American soldiers defending the area. The humans were completely cut off from supplies and reinforcements. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on ammunition, food, and medical supplies. The weather was terrible, Katie said, snow and freezing cold. Our soldiers didn't have proper winter clothing. Many of them got frostbite. Some lost fingers and toes. The wounded couldn't be evacuated because the enemy controlled all the roads. "A hopeless situation," Zixtalan observed. "Any rational commander would negotiate for surrender." That's exactly what the enemy thought. Katie smiled, but there was something fierce in her expression. The enemy commander sent a message to the American general. It was a formal demand for surrender. He pointed out that the Americans were surrounded, that reinforcements would not arrive in time, that continued resistance would only result in more deaths. He asked for an answer, and the American general surrendered? No. Katie picked up the coin and turned it over in her fingers. The American general sent back a reply. It was 1 word long, just 4 letters. "Nuts." Zixtalan's translator struggled with this. "I do not understand. What does this word mean in this context?" "It's an old slang term. It basically means absolutely not. Go away. We reject your offer completely." Katie laughed softly. The enemy commander was so confused he had to ask an American prisoner what it meant. When he found out, he was furious. What happened next? The Americans kept fighting. They held their positions through the freezing weather, through the constant attacks, through everything the enemy threw at them. They fought when they ran out of ammunition. They fought when they ran out of food. They held on until reinforcements finally broke through the enemy lines and reached them. Zixtalan was beginning to see a pattern in these stories. Over and over again, humans face impossible situations. Over and over again, they refused to accept defeat. Over and over again, they kept fighting long after any logical species would have given up. There's another story from the same war. Katie continued. A mission called the Doolittle Raid. Shortly after the war began for America, Our military commanders wanted to strike back at the enemy, but the enemy was too far away for our planes to reach and return safely. So they did not launch the attack? No, they launched it anyway. Katie's eyes were bright now, lit up by some inner fire. They knew the pilots probably would not have enough fuel to return. They knew many of them would die or be captured. But the mission was important for morale. It would show our people that we could strike back, that we were not helpless. So the pilots volunteered anyway. She told him how the planes flew thousands of kilometers to reach their targets, how they dropped their bombs knowing they might never see home again, how many of them crashed or were forced to land in hostile territory, how some were captured, tortured, and executed. But they completed the mission, Katie said. They did what they set out to do, even though it cost them everything. Because sometimes the mission matters more than survival. Zixelin felt something shifting inside him. He had always believed that the purpose of military strategy was to win while minimizing losses. The best victory was one where your own forces suffered few casualties. This was common sense. This was rational thinking. But humans did not think this way. For them, victory was not about minimizing losses. It was about achieving the objective, no matter the cost. You asked why Human Command believes this mission will succeed, Katie said. She put the coin back in her pocket and looked directly at Zixelin. It's not because we have better weapons or more soldiers. It's because we don't know how to quit. We don't have a breaking point like your people do. When things get hard, we don't retreat. We dig in deeper. And if you all die in the attempt, then we die trying. And the next group of humans who comes after us will try again, and the group after them, and the group after them. Eventually we will succeed, or we will run out of humans. Those are the only two options. Zixelin was quiet for a long time. He had lived for over 150 cycles. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species evolve and go extinct. He thought he understood war better than almost anyone in the galaxy. But sitting in this dim recreation bay, listening to a young human tell stories about her people's bloody past, he realized he had been wrong. He had understood warfare, but he had not understood war, not the way humans understood it. War was not just about tactics and weapons and force calculations. War was about will. It was about which side wanted victory badly enough to pay the price. And humans, it seemed, were willing to pay prices that would bankrupt any other species. When we attacked the Crest base, Zixelin said slowly, "You will not retreat, no matter what happens." It was not a question. He already knew the answer. Katie shook her head. "No, we won't retreat. We'll either take that base or die inside it. There's no third option." The Valoran commander looked at his human partner with new eyes. She was small, fragile, short-lived. By every objective measure, she was less capable than him. But she carried something inside her that he did not have, something that could not be measured or quantified. She carried the legacy of 1,000 generations of stubborn, persistent, unbreakable humans, and that, he was beginning to understand, was more valuable than any weapon. The assault began at ship's dawn. Zixelin stood in the transport bay with his weapon ready, surrounded by soldiers from a dozen different species. Valorans, Taurans, Kells, Greeks, and others, all united under the banner of the Galactic Coalition. But his attention was focused on the humans. There were 40 of them in his assault group, 40 small, soft-bodied creatures in gray combat armor, checking their weapons with the calm efficiency of professional soldiers. Katie stood among them, her face blank and her eyes distant. She looked like a different person than the one who had told him stories all night. The warmth was gone from her expression. Something cold and hard had taken its place. The transport shuddered as it left the endless dawn and began its descent toward the Crest forward base. Through the small viewports, Zixelin could see energy beams lancing through the void as the Crest defenders tried to shoot them down. The transport shields flickered under the assault. 2 minutes to landing, the pilot announced over the intercom. "Expect heavy resistance at the breach point." Katie moved through the crowded bay until she stood beside Zixelin. She had to crane her neck to look up at him. Despite everything he had learned about humans, it still seemed strange that such small creatures could be so dangerous. "Ready, Commander?" she asked. "I have been ready for combat since before your grandfather was born," he replied. Katie smiled. It was a cold smile, a predator's smile. "Good. Stay close to me. Do what I do. And whatever happens, don't stop moving forward." The transport hit the ground with a bone-jarring impact. The doors blew open, and suddenly they were running through smoke and fire, the screams of weapons filling the air. Zixtalin had fought in many battles. He knew how to move through a combat zone, how to use cover, how to pick targets and eliminate them efficiently. But running beside Katie, he saw something he had never seen before. The humans moved like water flowing downhill. They never stopped, never hesitated. When one fell, the others stepped over the body and kept going. When they encountered resistance, they pushed through it with fury that bordered on madness. A crest soldier appeared from behind a barrier, energy weapon raised. Before Zixtalin could react, Katie had already fired 3 shots. The enemy fell, and she was moving again before the body hit the ground. They pushed deeper into the base. The fighting was brutal and close. In some corridors, they were fighting so close to the enemy that Zixtalin could have reached out and touched them. This was nothing like the clean, distant warfare his people preferred. This was dirty, violent, and terrifying. Halfway to their objective, they hit a fortified position. The crest had set up heavy weapons behind reinforced barriers. The first team to try to breach it had been cut down within seconds. A Kellic sergeant crawled back from the failed assault, blue blood leaking from wounds in his side. "It's impossible," he gasped. "We need to fall back. Find another route."